When I first started learning English, I thought I was doing everything right. I had notebooks full of vocabulary lists. I memorized grammar rules like a school student preparing for an exam. I even downloaded language apps and followed them religiously. But despite all of that, every time I tried to speak, I felt like I was dragging my words through mud. My sentences were slow. My confidence was weak. And worst of all, I was always translating in my head. I didn't realize how much this habit was hurting me. I would hear someone say something simple in English, like, "Do you want coffee?" And before I could answer, I'd translate the question into my native language, then form the answer in my head, translate it back into English, and only then speak. By that time, the moment was already gone. The person had moved on, or worse. They were staring at me, waiting patiently while I fought my way through the sentence. It wasn't just slow, it was exhausting. My brain felt like a busy airport, with one language taking off and the other one trying to land at the same time. I thought this was normal. I thought, of course I have to translate. How else can I speak? But deep inside, I knew something wasn't right. I wanted to speak naturally, quickly, like English was my own voice. But it felt like I was always borrowing it, never owning it. The turning point came one evening when I was trying to order food at a small restaurant. The waiter asked me, "Would you like it to go or eat here?" Such a simple question, but my brain froze. I heard the English. I translated it to my language. Then I translated my answer, "I'll eat here," back into English. But somehow, I said, "I want to sit in this place." The waiter smiled kindly, but I felt embarrassed. That sentence didn't even sound natural to me, and I knew it didn't sound natural to him either. I walked out of that restaurant feeling defeated. Not because I had made a mistake, but because I realized I was still thinking in my first language. Every time I wanted to speak English, I had to take a detour through another language. It was like trying to run while tied to a chair. And I thought, if I don't change this now, I'll always speak like a stranger in my own mouth. So I made a promise to myself that night. I'm going to stop translating in my head. It sounded simple, but it wasn't. This habit was so deep in my mind, I didn't even notice when I was doing it. I had to train myself like an athlete. I had to catch my own thoughts, slow them down, and push them to form in English, even if they were broken. The next morning, I tried something new. I woke up and instead of thinking, "Okay, I need to brush my teeth," in my language, I forced my brain to say it in English. I need to brush my teeth. It felt strange, like trying to write with my left hand, but I kept doing it. Open the window. I am hungry. I need coffee. I feel sleepy. These weren't beautiful sentences, but they were mine. And they were English, and that was enough. I started doing this throughout the day. As I walked to work, I'd look around and describe things in English inside my head. That car is red. She is wearing a white shirt. It's cloudy today. Some days, I struggled to find the right words. I'd stop in the middle of a sentence and freeze. But I made another rule. Don't go back to your language. Explain it in English. If I didn't know the word for trash can, I'd say, "The place where we throw garbage." If I forgot the word for umbrella, I'd say, "That thing people use when it rains." That one habit, explaining things in English even when I didn't know the word, changed everything. I stopped depending on translation. I started thinking like a speaker, not like a student. It wasn't always easy. Sometimes I would get stuck and feel frustrated. I'd be tired from work, and my brain would beg to go back to my native language. But I reminded myself, fluency is not about comfort. It's about consistency. And every time I chose English, even if it was hard, I was building something stronger in my mind. I remember one particular moment that made me smile. I was walking home, and I saw a street performer playing the violin. It was beautiful, and, without thinking, the words came into my head. That music is soft, but it goes straight into my heart. I paused, not because of the music, but because I realized something. I didn't translate that sentence. It just came. In English. Naturally. That's when I knew I was on the right path. I started talking to myself more, out loud when I was alone. I'd say things like, "Okay, what do I need to do today?" Or, "Why am I feeling so tired?" I even practiced small conversations in my head, like I was preparing for real ones. Sometimes I'd pretend I was being interviewed on a podcast. I'd imagine the questions and answer them in English. At first it felt silly, but it helped me train my brain to think directly in the language. I also started reading simple books, not for study, but for fun. I chose children's books, short novels, things that made me smile. I didn't stop to translate. I just read. At first, I didn't understand every word, but I didn't panic. I let the meaning come through naturally. Just like when I was a kid learning my first language, I didn't need to know every word to understand the story, and slowly, my mind began to process the rhythm, the structure, the natural flow of English. It became a part of my thinking, and I noticed something strange. The more I thought in English, the easier it became to speak. Not because I learned new grammar rules, but because I wasn't fighting with my thoughts anymore. My mind and my mouth were finally speaking the same language. Of course, there were still moments when I slipped. When I was tired or under pressure, my brain would still try to run back to the old habit of translation. But I forgave myself. I reminded myself that I wasn't chasing perfection. I was building a new mindset. And that takes time. One evening, about 2 months into this new habit, I was sitting in my room with a cup of tea. I was writing in my journal, in English, as I often did now. The window was open, and I could hear kids playing outside. And suddenly, I realized I hadn't thought in my native language all day, not once. Every task, every thought, every reflection had been in English. Not because I forced it, but because my mind had started choosing it. That night, I smiled at myself. Not a big smile, just a small, quiet one. The kind of smile you give yourself when you realize, I'm really doing this. But I also knew something else. If I wanted to keep growing, I had to go deeper. Stopping translation was just the first step. The next challenge was to surround my mind with English completely. I had to create an environment where English wasn't just something I used when I remembered, but something I lived in. That meant my music, my social media, my phone, my books, my entertainment, even my thoughts, had to be English, all the time. And so, the next morning, I opened my phone, went to the settings, and changed the language to English. And just like that, the next chapter of my journey began. The moment I changed the language on my phone to English, something shifted in my brain. It was a small action, just a few taps on a screen, but it felt like crossing a line, like I had officially moved into a new world, One where English wasn't just a subject I studied, it was the environment I lived in. It was strange at first. Suddenly, familiar buttons looked unfamiliar. Words I had seen in my language every day. Settings, battery, notifications were now in English. I had to slow down, think carefully, and sometimes guess what things meant. But that challenge, that mental discomfort, was exactly what I needed. Because it forced my brain to adapt. No more switching back and forth. No more running home to the safety of my native language. I had burned the bridge. There was no going back. At first, I was afraid that making English part of my daily life would feel like pressure, like I was forcing myself to study all the time. But surprisingly, it didn't feel that way. Because I wasn't sitting at a desk or memorizing grammar anymore, I was simply living, and English was becoming the background music of my life. I started with the easiest thing, my ears. I began listening to English every single day, not textbooks or formal lectures, real English. I found podcasts about topics I liked: mental health, travel, storytelling, even cooking. I listened while I walked, cooked, or cleaned. I didn't try to understand every single word. I just let the sounds and rhythms wash over me. Even if I missed 30% of the words, I kept listening. And something magical happened. My brain started catching patterns. Phrases that once felt like a puzzle, like by the way or sort of or you know what I mean, started feeling natural. Like friends I had heard so many times, I finally understood them. Then came YouTube. I stopped watching videos in my language and started watching English vloggers. Not just English teachers, but people living their lives, sharing their days, telling stories. I wasn't just learning vocabulary, I was learning culture, expressions, body language, and tone. It was like I was silently following real people around the world, and with every video I felt more connected, more fluent, not just in words, but in life. Music was next. I made playlists with English songs, some slow and emotional, others fast and fun. I sang along, even when I didn't fully understand the lyrics. I looked up words when I was curious, but most of the time, I just let myself enjoy it. I started feeling the emotions behind the language, and that made a huge difference. Because language isn't just grammar, it's energy, it's feeling, it's rhythm. Music helped me feel the soul of English. After that, I turned to reading, but not hard books, easy and enjoyable ones. Children's books, short stories, simple articles. I didn't read to study. I read to relax. I read in bed. I read in cafes. And I never stopped to translate. I just let my brain float in English. It reminded me of how I learned my first language, not by translating, but by absorbing meaning from context. When I read, I didn't panic about new words. I just kept going, trusting that my brain would learn through repetition and rhythm, not memorization. Social media, too, became part of my immersion. I changed my Instagram Explore page by following only English accounts. Quotes, funny memes, reels, everything was in English. At first, it felt a little artificial, like I was pretending to be someone I wasn't. But slowly, it became real. Because what you see daily shapes your thoughts. And my thoughts were now swimming in English. Even my shopping changed. When I searched for things online, clothes, books, gadgets, I did it in English. It sounds silly, but typing cute summer dress instead of letnja haljina, my native phrase, made a difference. Every small choice added up. every habit, became a thread in the fabric of my English mind. I remember one afternoon, maybe 2 or 3 weeks into this lifestyle shift, I was sitting at a bus stop, waiting. I wasn't thinking about English. I wasn't practicing or pushing. I was just watching people pass by. And suddenly I realized something. My thoughts were in English, not perfectly, not fluently, but naturally. I saw a child playing and thought, "He looks so happy." I looked at the cloudy sky and thought, "I hope it doesn't rain before I get home." I didn't translate those thoughts. They just appeared, quietly, like butterflies in the wind. That day, I almost cried. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real. A quiet, peaceful victory. A seed I had planted weeks ago was starting to grow, but I didn't stop there. I wanted English to live not just in my head, but in my space. So I started labeling things around my apartment. I wrote little sticky notes and placed them everywhere. Mirror, window, fridge, desk, lamp, bookshelf. It felt like I was building an English map inside my home. Every time I walked past something, I saw the word. I whispered it to myself, and soon I stopped needing the notes. They were already in my mind. I also began writing to-do lists in English. Grocery lists, journal entries, messages to myself, everything became a chance to practice. At night, I wrote about my day. Nothing fancy, just a few sentences. Today was busy. I had coffee with Sarah. We talked about our jobs. I felt tired, but happy. Simple, but powerful. Because that little journal became a reflection of my new brain. A brain that was starting to dream, process, and feel in English. And yes, I did start dreaming in English. Not every night. Not perfectly. But occasionally I'd wake up and realize my dream had people speaking English. Sometimes it was funny, like my grandma talking with a British accent. Sometimes it was random, like ordering pizza from an astronaut. But always, it felt like progress, because dreams are honest. They show what's truly happening deep inside. Some people ask me, "Didn't you get tired of English all the time?" And my answer is always the same, no, because I wasn't studying. I was living. English wasn't my homework, it was my soundtrack. And like a good song, it became something I wanted to hear again and again. Of course, there were moments of doubt. Some days I felt overwhelmed. I'd hear a native speaker talking fast and feel completely lost. I'd try to watch a movie without subtitles and feel frustrated. I'd compare myself to others and think, I'll never sound like them. But then I reminded myself, I don't need to sound like them. I just need to sound like me, in English, authentic, honest, real. So I kept going. I started talking to myself more, not just in the mirror, but in real moments. When I was cooking, I'd say, "Okay, now add the salt." When I dropped something, I'd mumble, "Ugh, not again." These little thoughts became like background dialogue in a movie. I was narrating my life, in English. And the more I did it, the more natural it became. And the best part? People noticed. My friends began to say, "You sound more confident." Strangers said, "Your English is really smooth." I even got compliments from native speakers who said, "Wow, you think like us." That meant more to me than anything, because thinking in English isn't just about fluency, it's about freedom. Freedom to express emotions without delay. Freedom to participate in conversations without fear. freedom to exist in two languages and eventually feel at home in both. Looking back now, I realize it wasn't one big decision that changed me. It was 100 tiny choices, changing my phone settings, listening to music, following English creators, talking to myself, reading small books, writing little notes, laughing at English memes, singing in the shower, watching videos without subtitles, dreaming, thinking, living. English wasn't outside me anymore. It was inside, in my ears, in my eyes, in my home, in my heart. And that immersion, that daily presence of the language, created a kind of fluency that no grammar book ever could. A fluency that started with a whisper and grew into a voice. But the journey wasn't over. If I truly wanted to live in English, not just for a few hours a day, but as a part of my identity, I needed to do more than just surround myself with the language. I had to practice thinking in it, actively and intentionally, not just when it came naturally, but when it didn't. Not just easy thoughts, but deep ones, emotional ones, real ones. That meant I had to start doing something I hadn't done before. I had to practice thinking in small sentences, every single day, and that's where the next part of my journey began. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed, legs tucked under me, a journal in my lap. It was a quiet evening, the kind where time feels slower. The light was soft, the air still. I had just finished watching a video from one of my favorite English-speaking creators. She had been talking about mindfulness, about being present, about listening to your thoughts. And it struck me how naturally she moved through her language, how her thoughts were not only in English, they were in flow, unbroken, simple, natural. That's when I realized something. I had filled my mind with English. I had surrounded myself with it, bathed in it, even dreamed in it. But there was still one thing missing. I hadn't practiced thinking in small, deliberate sentences. So much of my inner world was still a blur. Yes, I was thinking in English now more often, but it was like a foggy mirror. I could see shapes, outlines, but not full, clear expressions. I knew I needed more precision, more control. Not to sound perfect, not to be complex, just to be clear. That night, I decided I would start practicing tiny thoughts, short sentences, real things I was already thinking, but this time I would. Slow down and say them in English. Not long essays in my head. Not big, complex ideas. Just the simple truth of the moment in words I could manage. I began with what I felt. I am tired. My back hurts. I want to sleep. Then I added what I needed. I need to brush my teeth. I should drink some water. I forgot to call my sister. At first, I said these in my head, quietly, like tiny mental notes. But the more I did it, the more I realized something powerful. Every thought could become a sentence. It didn't matter how small it was. I kept going. This pillow is soft. My phone is charging. I hear a dog barking. This tea is too hot. I like this music. And slowly, this practice became a kind of inner dialogue, a rhythm, a habit, like narrating my life in real time, but in English, at the Zai. Grocery store, I'd think. I need eggs. Where is the milk? This line is long. She is in a hurry. He looks tired. When I was walking outside, it's cold today. That woman is wearing red shoes. The sky is beautiful. I forgot my gloves. I want to go home. These weren't deep thoughts. They weren't poetic or advanced. But they were real, mine. And that made them powerful. Because I was teaching my brain to think in English with no delay, no translation, and most importantly, no pressure. I stopped caring about being right. I cared about being consistent. I noticed that every time I built a sentence in my head, I became faster, more natural. And over time, those small thoughts combined into bigger ones. I need eggs became, I need eggs because I want to make pancakes. It's cold became, it's cold today and I didn't bring a jacket. I hope I don't catch a cold. It grew like climbing stairs, one small sentence at a time. There were days when my sentences felt boring, repetitive, like I was saying the same things over and over. I am hungry. I am tired. This is good. But that repetition, it wasn't a weakness. It was training. Just like athletes practice the same moves again and again, I was sharpening my mental reflexes, teaching my brain to default to English without hesitation. Sometimes I'd turn it into a little game. When I was brushing my teeth, I'd describe everything around me. The water is cold. This toothpaste is minty. I need a new toothbrush. I don't like this light. The mirror is dirty. Other times I'd ask myself questions. What do I want to eat? Why am I feeling sad? Should I go outside or stay in? I didn't always answer the questions. Just forming them in English was enough. It helped me train my inner voice to ask, think, and wonder in a language that was slowly becoming part of who I was. It became so automatic that one day I caught myself doing it without realizing. I was in the kitchen, looking for a spoon, and I whispered aloud, "Where did I put the spoon?" Not to anyone, just to myself. And then I laughed. Not because I was embarrassed, but because I realized something huge. I was talking to myself in English, completely naturally. No hesitation, no planning, no translation. And that's when I knew this small sentence practice was transforming me. I started going deeper with it. Instead of just describing what I saw or did, I started describing how I felt. I feel nervous. I am excited about tomorrow. I don't know why I feel sad. This moment feels peaceful. Suddenly, English wasn't just in my environment. It was inside my emotions, inside my mind. I started using these thoughts in more specific situations. At work, if something upset me, I'd think, "He ignored me again. I don't like that. This meeting is too long. I hope she understands my idea. I should speak more clearly next time." In social moments, I'd think, "She's funny. I want to say something, but I'm shy. I didn't understand that joke. Should I laugh or ask what it means?" Again, nothing complex. Just real life, processed in real time, in real English. One of the biggest changes came during conversations. Before, I used to pause a lot. I'd think in my language, then translate, then speak. But now, the small sentence habit helped me respond faster, even with imperfect English. I didn't need big words to express myself. If someone asked, "How was your weekend?" I didn't panic. I'd say, "It was good. I went to the park. I had coffee with a friend. We talked for hours." Simple, clear, natural. If I didn't know a word, I'd find another way. Instead of saying I felt frustrated, I might say I was angry and tired at the same time. Instead of, it was overwhelming, I'd say, it was too much for me. This skill, thinking in small sentences, became my greatest tool. Because fluency doesn't come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing how to use what you already know. I realize that even native speakers don't always use big words. Most conversations are made of short, clear thoughts. Really? Me too? No way. That's funny. I didn't know that. I have to go. See you later. And that made me feel so much better, because I didn't have to wait until I was advanced to speak fluently. I just had to think clearly, and that starts with small sentences. There was a moment that really confirmed this for me. I was riding the train, watching people around me. A mother and her child were talking in English. The child was maybe 5 or 6 years old. His sentences were short. Mom, I'm hungry. Can I have a cookie? Why is the sky blue? I like your smile. And as I listened, I realized this child is fluent. Not because he knows fancy words, but because he speaks from the heart, simply and directly. That was my goal too. So I kept building. Sentence by sentence, thought by thought, emotion by emotion. Started sharing my thoughts online in small English posts, on Instagram, in English groups. Sometimes just one line. I feel proud today. I spoke without fear. Other times, I had a bad day, but I'm still learning. The responses I got were amazing. People didn't care if my English was perfect. They cared that it was real. I realized then that thinking in small sentences wasn't just a practice. It was a mindset. A way of living with less fear, less pressure, and more honesty. And now, even when I face a difficult topic, something emotional or complicated, I don't freeze. I just start small. I'm feeling something strange. I don't know how to explain it, but I'll try. And then sentence by sentence, I build the thought. That's fluency. Not perfection, not speed, not vocabulary size, but the ability to think, feel, and express in the language that lives in your head and heart. And it all started with a simple decision. I will think in small sentences. Every day. But of course, no journey ends there. Once I became comfortable thinking in English, once my thoughts started flowing, even in short bursts, I knew it was time for the final and most powerful step. I had to speak those thoughts out, loud, because no matter how fluent your mind becomes, real fluency lives in your voice. And so, the next step in my story began.